Well, good morning. And this is um, lesson number 100 in the Workbook of A Course in Miracles. My part is essential to God's plan for salvation. And I think I owe a lesson from yesterday. I actually started to do it, and I was dissatisfied with um, with what I was with what I was putting on the video. So I just sort of stopped it after about, I don't know, 6 or 8 minutes. And I decided to wait a minute to do it, to just wait, because something just wasn't, I don't know, something wasn't feeling right. Um, Not that what I was saying wasn't okay, it was just that something was not feeling right. So I spent the day, I was driving back from Northern California, from up in the Bay Area, and thinking about it because these lessons um, have progressively become more and more personal to me, especially the ones that begin to talk about salvation. Um, because, I think, and I don't really know, I don't hear a lot of people speaking about salvation in relationship to A Course in Miracles. I hear um, everyone talking about awakening. I hear everyone talking about things like finding the now. I hear people talking about, a lot of different sort of new age ideas about what we're all supposed to be about in this in this sort of period of time that we're involved in. But to me, it has been since. And I know I bring this up often, and reference it, although for a number of reasons. If I could actually sometime get a chance to speak on it, maybe you'll understand. It was a seminal moment in my, let's call it development or growth or I don't know what you want, maturation or something. But I do know, when I had the awakening experience and when I indeed um, came to know God and understand God and the direct contact, I do know that what I walked away with um, as the greatest joy, um, and it's included in the idea that God is love, is the fact. I mean, the fact of having been saved. And I think one of the problems that we have with, let's call it, contemporary spiritual practice, as opposed to religious practices that many of us may have been involved in before, um, was many of the Christian religious practices dealt with salvation. Um, and there seemed to be so much tied to it. It seemed to represent sacrifice, actually. Um, but my discovery was it was not about sacrifice at all. In fact, it was giving up the idea that anything needed to be sacrificed whatsoever. Um, there's no sacrifice in salvation, because in salvation you gain back the complete awareness of who you are and the understanding of what that means. And that's what this lesson today is sort of leading us to. But it was my great joy to recognize that I had been saved. And the continuation of that is that everybody is already saved along with me. Now, that may not be something that everybody is aware of at this moment of time experientially. Perhaps you can get the concepts of why we're saved and what salvation is from reading something like A Course in Miracles. I don't know where if you would get it from anything else actually, um, because I don't really see it in anything else. I don't really see um, salvation, and that's one of the things that Dr. Wapnick used to speak of about A Course in Miracles. It was fundamentally Christian in its utilization of concepts, and because of the nature of Christianity and the direction that it took, as it became more and more predominantly religious rather than oriented around spiritual principles, um, the, the, the turn that it took um, rendered salvation a function of Christianity rather than spiritual principles. And today, in this new age, the how should I say it? The everybody wants to wake up. I mean, everybody talks about awakening and finding themselves, and and the Course is one of the few things that deal with it, because it's an attempt to reassociate our mind, and utilizing the Christian terminology to reassociate the past misunderstandings about these things to come into a current acceptance and experience of the truth of them. And the truth is that I have been saved, I am saved, and so are you along with me. And while you may not have discovered it experientially, the decision to take your part in God's plan for salvation and to be about your fulfillment of your part offers you the recognition that as a byproduct of your doing this, you will recognize that you are saved and all the world is saved. And I don't think there's a greater joy than that, because to me it contained the entirety of what everybody has been searching for. In that moment, I didn't know, in a sense. I wasn't a spiritual seeker. I wasn't, in that sense, a pilgrim. I wasn't a follower of anybody spiritually. I was a rejecter of my own religion. I didn't know anything about the concepts that have been presented in the Course, or I hadn't read any spiritual doctrines or teachings by anyone else. I just wasn't interested. I didn't know I was searching. And then in that moment when I discovered, in that moment when Jesus offered me some simple instruction, I simply said yes. And my mind and heart were open, and God stepped in and revealed himself to me. And I recognized the nature of the fact that we are saved. Everything came along with it. It showed me, in fact, that I was searching and that my search was now over. And experientially, it put an end to the need for my search, because I saw what everybody had been searching for, and it was achieved. I saw what everyone was seeking in these experiences they're attempting to have, and what everybody was talking about, and it had occurred in me. And there was no greater joy in me to recognize that, because the biggest fear that I had was in a sense retribution from God for the things that I thought I had done that required punishment, and from which there didn't seem to be an escape from the actual performance of the things over and over again that were causing me the consternation of thinking I need salvation or needed something. And it was all there, contained in the one package. When I picked up the Course, it began to speak to me directly, and it would say, are you the one? And I think for me, the experience that I had increased my desire, so that, not knowing what it means, are you the one? Not knowing what it means to be the one, I was willing to be the one. Someone, it seemed, needed to answer the question that was asked over and over again in the Course in the affirmative. Had to be willing as Jesus. I mean, the willingness must start out there, and based on the nature of the experience of being saved, the willingness to say yes to being the one contained within it the desire that everyone know or come to know as I had come to know the truth of who I am, and the nature of the fact that they are already saved, so that they no longer had to be plagued by their own self-doubt, their own guilt and their own fear, because that makes this place a terrible place to live in, with no seeming escape, because there's no relief from it within the consciousness that's experiencing all of this turmoil. You are indeed essential to God's plan. Without your joy, his joy is incomplete. Without your smile, the world cannot be saved. While you are sad, the light of which God himself appointed as the means to save the world is dim and lusterless, and no one laughs, because all laughter can but echo yours. Now, when you read things like that, it seems like you're being asked to do something that's overwhelmingly not within your power, or requires what we would think in humility to say, well, I don't know if I'm that one. Trying to be humble in this. You don't have to be humble. You have to learn to be strong in the ways of the Lord, strong in the ways of God, certain in your identity. So throughout the book, whenever the question was asked, are you the one? I would just have to answer yes. First of all, I didn't know anybody else who was reading the book. And second of all, having had the experience of being saved, I figured if I could have it, anybody could have this thing. And I was the most unlikely candidate around, as I'm sure we all feel. As I'm sure we all feel within ourselves about that. The self-doubt and the fear and the guilt that we all carry with us, until we begin to find the way to free ourselves from it, is so prevailing. And to look at this in the nature of, this is Jesus speaking to us, Jesus who's undergone a crucifixion and resurrection, and has been given this celestial title, and we're being asked to take our place alongside of his. I mean, in one sense, there's a certain degree of humility that's required. In another sense, there's a certain degree of fearlessness about which we have to go about this, in the acceptance and our willingness to do whatever is required, simply because I would want to leave no one out, because no one is left out of God's plan for salvation. And coming to it the way I did, who knows whether I was the first, the last, the middle, it didn't make a difference. All I knew is that coming to it the way I came to it, I couldn't say no any longer. And it didn't mean that I knew what to do. It meant that I was humbled by the idea that there were things of being asked of me that perhaps seemed like tall tasks, and I would have to say yes, and then immediately ask for help with what I was being given, what I was being offered, because there's no way in the world human strength can live or be or do what's being asked of you. I mean, there is this idea in this, and it says, and this is beautiful when I read it. Now let us try to find that joy which proves to us and all the world God's will for us. It is your function that you find it here. Well, where else would you find it? If you couldn't find it exactly where you are, then it means it was missing and lacking, and it wasn't everywhere, and it wasn't all pervasive, and it wasn't all powerful, and it wasn't eternal, and it wasn't infinite. So, of course, you have to be able to find it right here, right now, exactly where you are and exactly as you are. It is your function that you find it here and that you find it now. For this you came. This is the reason why we came here. We came here to work out our own salvation and the salvation of the world. Make no mistake about it. For this you came. Let this one be the day that you succeed. Look deep within you, undismayed by all the little thoughts and foolish goals you pass as you ascend to meet the Christ in you. And I think this is one of the things that, this is one of the great obstacles, the idea that the things in the world we are required to fulfill the tasks in the world in a way in which becomes accepting to others and accepting to God, rather than recognize that the task that we have been given in this world is to pass by the tasks of the world, because they are merely distractions in our efforts to recognize that we have been saved, and recognize that as being saved, it's our joy to help save those who have yet to have this experience. Now, there's nothing required of you other than the willingness to pass by the things of the world, to find out who you are in your unworldly identity as whole, perfect, and the living Son of God. Here, that identity transfers into the salvation of the world. Think what this means. You have indeed been wrong in your belief that sacrifice is asked. That's the nature of what has been taught in Christianity since the beginning of Christianity as a religion that was used to continue as an establishment, to continue itself and to become dominant. I read something from Bill Thetford yesterday that was put on the board, and what impressed me most about it was this whole idea that Jesus had shown Bill and Helen this huge, beautiful church upon which a healing center had been built, the Mayo Clinic. And later on, when Bill was in this little simple assignment of meeting a limousine in order to take someone someplace that they wanted to go and allow her to experience the joy of being in a limousine, and Bill experienced the grace of God and the ability for the limousine to show up in a seemingly impossible situation. Jesus says to Bill, "This is my church. This is my church. Brothers helping other brothers." As Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, your body is not the temple, your relationship is the temple. And there is nothing in any relationship that is lacking except what it is that you're keeping from that relationship, because you already have everything. So if there's something missing in that relationship, it must be something that you're holding back. And what we hold back is the recognition that we are saved, and there's nothing that we need from each other except the ability to free ourselves from the limitations of the world and the idea that the world has anything to offer us, and so that we could demonstrate to our brothers that freedom in our thoughts and in our actions and in the expression of our love, so that they can begin to realize that it is safe for them as well to go beyond the confines of the thinking that's been reinforced by all the world's establishments, including the religions, that keep the simplicity of salvation from us, in that it is based on a personal relationship that we have with God, with our brother Jesus as our Savior, and then with each other. That's the church. That's how this is accomplished. I can see now why so few people want to talk about salvation and rather turn into something like awakening, because it seems to have the Christian connotation of sacrifice, and at the same time it seems to come with it this celestial idea of an identity as being Jesus, the Son of God, and perhaps the person who's discussing it doesn't feel like he's up to the task of being exactly as Jesus, the Son of God, was here and is now with you, as you are here and you are now with him. And that's the entirety of the situation. You are God's son, and so am I. In the kingdom of heaven, we have never not been saved. We have always been whole and perfect. And it is our great joy to discover that wholeness and perfection here and recognize we never left the kingdom and share the good news with our brothers so that they don't have to succumb to thinking of themselves as a failure, as being lost within a world of space and time, which has no reality, and unless we give it, has no ability to keep from us who we are in the kingdom.